Welcome to this Conversations on Groong episode. Before we get going, we'd like to thank our listeners. We really appreciate all your comments on our YouTube videos, so keep them coming, keep the dialogue channels open. We love to hear everyone's thoughts. Today we're talking about next month's 2024 parliamentary elections in Georgia. We have with us Dr. Nikoloz Bitsadze, a scholar with expertise in politics and international relations. Dr. Bitsadze, thanks for coming on the show.
And Gamarjoba.
Hello, thanks for having me here. I'm really glad to be here with you guys and to meet all the audience, and I'll be glad to answer all the questions.
We are glad to have you. So, as this is the first time that you are on our show, would you tell us a couple of things about yourself, your interests, and what are you up to?
Sure. Yeah. I currently am located in Tbilisi, Georgia. I work for the CIPRF. It's an local organization. We do research some politics and international relations. Also, we do some philosophy and physics and other stuff. So we have a broad team there, and I do mostly research Russian foreign policy at this point, but I hope I'm proficient in many other ways.
All right. Well, we have a lot of questions, even in philosophical areas.
Yeah, we can wax philosophical.
Glad to hear them. Glad to hear them.
So let's start with politics, though. Georgia's parliamentary elections are set for October 26, and political tensions are actually rising, if not already very high. The ruling Georgian Dream party has been clashing with the West, and the EU has paused Georgia's candidacy for membership. And both the US and the EU have been imposing sanctions on Georgian Dream's party leadership. The rift really began earlier this year with the Transparency on Foreign Influence law and other conservative legislative initiatives. Georgia's refusal to support certain anti-Russian measures during the Ukraine war have also strained relations. Georgian Dream appears to have doubled down on its stance, though. Just a few days ago, they named Bidzina Ivanishvili, Irakli Kobakhidze, and Irakli Garibashvili as the lead candidates during this election. Finally, a month ago, Georgian Dream published a post stating that if they achieve constitutional majority, quote unquote, constitutional majority, then they will initiate a legal process as a result of which Saakashvili's UNM party, the United National Movement, and its satellites would be declared unconstitutional, illegal. And we thought Armenian elections were full of drama, Despite the strong language, those recent polls and experts we talked to have indicated that Georgian Dream is very unlikely to get this constitutional majority. So why does Georgian Dream want to outlaw the UNM, and what legal mechanisms would allow this?
Well, it's a good question because this is a question many people ask themselves in Georgia too, and not many people have the real answer. But okay, let's start from the beginning. So pre-election season is going great right now. There were some dramas about different parties or different people in the parties who should have gotten together. For example, Gaharia should have attended Lelo, and this party should have became like the great power in this pre-election period. But they didn't agree on something, and I guess there were some orders or some advices from the West for the opposition to somehow unite. But I guess we are Georgians, we it's difficult for us to make an agreement with each other, and even with a big amount of advices from West, it's difficult for us to make an agreement on something. And I guess there were some problems with who should have been the first candidate from the party, and I mean that there wasn't any agreement between Lelo and Gaharia, and I guess Lelo has become a bit weaker than it should have been in pre-election, and maybe some advisors from the West didn't like it, and they wanted this party to unite into some big strong group. But Georgians don't like any orders from the West, even in the opposition. So they couldn't unite. But the president has played a huge role, and they had a meeting with the president. And president tried to make this bromance come true between those two, but they didn't. So, well, the opposition seems to grow, but they still didn't get to the point where they can become a huge counterpart of Georgian Dream. And I guess I don't know about the constitutional majority. I won't be so much optimistic, I guess, because anyway, the Georgian Dream has done some controversial things and moves in the past, and they lost some votes, but they also gained some votes, and we don't know where they stand right now. We are not sure. Even in Georgian Dream, they are not sure where they are standing, and they are begging at some point for a constitutional majority because they know that if they don't get it, the parliamentary process will be very difficult and complicated in future. And I guess the West will do their best to weaken Georgian Dream and to make the opposition stronger here. And well, there are some reports that West and Western colleagues are planning to do some overthrow, and maybe they will finance some non-governmental organizations. They will more finance more the opposition, and maybe this will, well, somehow make people and the audience of Georgian Dream disappointed by their politics. And well, there are some ways like Europe can influence that because we have like visa liberalization with EU, and this is a strong handle, I guess, and they can ban it. And well, there are going to be people who are now supporting Georgian Dream who will be disappointed by this result and this decision, and maybe they lost a couple of votes also. So, well,
Yeah.
uh,
Well, I think about constitutional majority as if it was the supermajority that the ruling party in Armenia, civil contract, has enjoyed in the parliament. And I can tell you that for the last many years, it's a tyranny because it's a one-party rule and the opposition absolutely does not count. They can't stop anything in parliament and they can't get any laws passed, and they can be completely ignored as well. How do voters react to Georgian Dream's radical statements like, outlawing the opposition? Do they require this kind of rhetoric, or does it help them? Is it macho? Why do they make such statements?
oh, well, I don't know about the banning of national movement. I don't know what stands behind this decision because this is a this might be a popular decision because there are people who say that, oh, like our country would be much better if like not national movement, They done bad things. They are blocking many good decisions which could have been done. They are making protests at the Liberty Square at the parliament, and like they are somehow preventing country from being better than it is now. But I don't know what does it mean like ban the party? Okay, you ban
Exactly.
the name. Well, yeah, okay. There are gonna be some people who will just change their name to not National Movement, but okay, like National Step or something like that.
Formerly known as National, United
The
Yeah,
Nations.
party,
formerly
the
known as
party
National Movement.
formerly
Okay.
known as the UNM.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what are we getting? Okay, you banned you like made your promise come true. You banned them. Okay, what's the else? If you start to jail all of them, it becomes a massacre. Like, well, you don't win anything. I don't think if they jail like 20 or 25 people from UNM, this will somehow benefit them. I don't feel like that because, well, it's like how you said,
Yeah.
it's getting into tyranny if you like allowed just jail any kind of opposition you want. Maybe there are people among them who deserve to be jailed. Like I'm not saying that, but well, if you are doing this as pre-election promise, well, that's the if you wanted to jail them, you had many years. If they done something wrong, you had many years to do it. If you are doing this as pre-election campaign, well, that's a suspicious thing. And like being a UNM is not a party. Like my co-host who was here as a guest before, Achilsi Haralidze, told me like, and I like this idea that being a UNM is not being a part of the party. It's your mindset. Being a UNM or Georgian Dream is not just being in a party, it's having a certain mindset. And banning, you can't ban the mindset. Yeah. You can't
Right.
you can't ban people from having some world views as they have. And that's the problem. So I don't understand what does it mean. This promise looks promising because well, it
So it's
sounds
like a
very
populist. It's a
nice.
populist
It
move.
sounds very nice. But what are the legal steps to do it? I don't really understand because you can't change anything. You ban the name. Yeah, no, you can't ban the name. They will change the name. You jail the people. No, it's like becoming a totalitarian government. You can't do
Right.
it. You change the mindset. You are not a like national psychologist. You don't do it. So what? So for me, it's just a very loud words which don't have any power behind them. That's all.
Yeah, it seems like more like a populist rhetoric. And I think this helps us segue into some polling numbers that we have been looking at recently. A month ago, the Gorby polls showed that Georgia Dream had 59.3%, while UNM itself had like 13.1%. Meanwhile, a more recent poll from Edison Research put GD, Georgian Dream at 32.3%, while Unity Alliance, which includes UNM, would get 20%. But no matter how you look at it, it seems like the opposition is a small minority. The majority, it looks like the majority goes to Georgia Dream. So is it correct to say that regardless of the poll, most people are with Georgian Dream?
Yes, sure. I guess that most people are with Georgian Dream, and I hate making some predictions because even if I consider myself a good analyst, I not trying not to do predictions because it's the best thing to do. It's the worst thing to do actually, but I guess they are going to get some around 50% of the votes. And so you need a 65 for constitutional majority, if I'm not mistaken. I guess they are not getting that, but around 50, I think
It's
it's
possible.
possible for them.
Yeah.
Yes, sure, it is possible. But if we are considering Gorby or NDI or any other polls, there are no objective polls. Our poll is trying to strengthen the positions of the organization they were paid from. And I guess Gorby will give Georgian Dream maybe 3 or 4% more. NDI or some other Jonestown Foundation, they will give Georgian Dream like 3 or 4% less. But they are like, I guess you should watch all the polls and maybe try to get an average from
Right.
from all those numbers, and that will be true. But there is a big amount of people who are in between, who are not voting for anybody. For example, me, I have never been to any elections. I never voted for any person, and well,
And will you be also boycotting or not voting this time?
oh no, this time it is even worse. There were
Okay.
some. There were some moments where I could go, and well, and those were the safe options for me. But now there is no safe option, I guess. And anyway, I will be responsible for my decision, and I guess that there is no candidate right now which I truly like trust, and that's the point. And this is the point for many people, actually. This is the point for 50 or 60% of population. Georgian Dream anyway was disappointing for like last couple of years for many people, and they moved from being good choice for the liberal part of our society. They moved to a point where they are good choice for leftists and more conservative part of our society. And I guess maybe the conservative part of our society now is a bit bigger because like the whole international process and like this part of society is growing, and they needed to like get attention of these people, but they left, but they lost some votes from the liberal part, and it was very different when they were beginning their campaign like many years ago when they changed Saakashvili in the government. And well, they were like, well, liberals were very in favor of their party, and then now it changed. And I guess they are moving to they're trying to get the most votes of conservatives and some leftists, because I guess that there is a big amount of people in regions which are mostly in favor of Georgian Dream, and I guess the most opposition of Georgian Dream is in Tbilisi, and like Tbilisi is the like most liberal city here, I guess, and every vote against will be from Tbilisi, but we should consider the whole country because we mostly people in Tbilisi and liberal part of Tbilisi, they don't consider the people who are working on the land and who have some animals and growing crops in Kakhetia or somewhere around there. And
Do you think it's a liberal versus conservative issue, or is it incumbent versus opponent? Because in Armenia as well, we find that the regions support the incumbent because whether people explain it because the state media has the most influence in the regions and so forth and so on, but or maybe educational status, maybe average age of people, or do you believe that in reality, people in the region is more ideological, I guess?
I see from my perspective that there are some powers who are trying to make this as liberal versus conservative. And this is like this is a Hollywood movie, like you do good versus evil or something like that. It's not the case in this one. And I'm really against such kind of interpretation, because you are dividing society more than it is already divided, and you are making you are trying to do good Georgians and bad Georgians, like bad Georg, and those are all the people from your country, so you can't make such dividends by them. I don't see this is a liberal versus conservative. Also, who are the liberals? Like Georgian Dream were liberals for whole their like time being in the government. They began to become conservatives like last 2 or 3 years. How can we like divide them by this? Because they came to government, and their whole idea was we are going to be somewhere like a national movement, but less radical. we do all the things national movement did, but we're gonna be less radical. And that was the point. And they were doing this like for last I don't know, 8 to 12 years. And now they are like changing to conservative. I feel like they know what are the views of population, and they're trying to play on this views and try to get more votes from conservatives. But I don't feel like the Georgian Dream is a conservative party by itself. No, they are just changing their politics in the way, in the shape where how society is changing. And they are trying to replicate the views of society, and that's all. And I don't see this like liberal against conservative, but because we can't find like people who are truly liberals for with 100% and truly conservative 100%, and these dividends won't help, I guess.
In many of our small countries, the capitals are very important. Is Tbilisi the most important hub for the elections? And also, can you comment, what about places like Azeri-populated Marneuli and Armenian-populated Javakheti? How do these regions come into play during elections?
That's a good question. Yeah, most people in Georgia live in capital, and in our small countries like in Armenia also, most people live in Yerevan, and yeah, of course, capital plays a huge role in this one, and I guess Georgian Dream also tries to do their best and to be popular in the regions and gather other population. If we are trying to consider and think about locally populated Azerbaijanis and Armenians, they do play a role, of course. And I guess that from my perspective, from how I know, and there are people I met, and I guess those populations were not feeling themselves safe during sexual period. And there were some, well, in Saakashvili period in the last years, Saakashvili was trying to move to like very pro-Georgian set, and he was trying to assimilate all the nationalities we have in Georgia, and I guess he was harsh with some of them, and I met people from those regions, and I know from their mouth that it was harsh time for them, for many of them during the Saakashvili period. Now they feel like great, they are safe, they can evolve, they are like getting a good salaries. I still blame Georgian Dream for not having a good language politics, I guess, because I meet many people from some of Georgian regions who speak only Azerbaijani, or they know only Armenian and Russian, and they don't know Georgian. But they still, I don't know if this is the case in Armenia, if you have such cases, but there are like maybe around 10% of people of our population don't speak Georgian, and I think this is the case where Georgian Dream is very weak, and they didn't strengthen this politics. But still, they gave those people a chance to develop, and they are like living much better than they were doing in Saakashvili period. And I guess their votes are in favor of Georgian Dream in this case, not because they are doing something good for them, but mostly because they are not doing something bad, and this is already a
Yeah,
benefit
so
for them, I
essentially
guess.
it's a resentment of the old regime. Yeah, in Armenia, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know, depending on how you look at it, Armenia is very much a monoethnic country right now. We can
Well,
go
Hovik,
into how it
can I
might
ask you,
change, but
there's a 50,000 strong Yazdi community.
no, but they all go to Armenian schools. I mean, they have
Right.
the option to
They all speak Russian and Armenian, so they're very
I mean,
integrated.
well, they still have their own, I believe they still have their own schools, but
Yeah.
Armenian is pretty much a mandatory thing. But let's consider the geopolitical context of all of this. Essentially, both sides are presenting these elections as an existential battle, either a chance to pivot to the West or to reject the West. And if voters, for instance, endorse Georgian Dream and conservative policies that are associated with them, they could effectively put the EU aspirations on hold indefinitely. Or maybe that's how we see it from the outside. How important are these elections in Georgia for you and for, I would say, let's say, average Georgians?
Well, we need to point out who are the average Georgians in this case. But as I see myself, there are also people who consider this as an existential threat, I guess, Georgia, and there are people who like don't care. And mostly among conservatives, I guess, and among like leftists, I hear that West is going to overthrow the government, and they are trying and they will do their best to make those elections not count, and they are going to assume that there were some wrong steps from the Georgian Dream, and they will try to make their best to include opposition as much as possible in this process. And I guess there are gonna be protests. There are gonna be a lot of protests. This is the thing I can promise you, because after the elections, maybe 2 or 3 months, it's gonna be a very vital period for the Georgian Dream. It doesn't matter how they end up the elections and what will be the result. Anyway, there are gonna be a huge protest here, and they will try to convince them that they didn't win the elections, and they will try to make pressure as much as possible. And I don't feel like this is the existential threat, because every elections there is this story that this is some vital thing going on, and every party is trying to create a scenery, an image that
Yes.
if we don't win these elections, like the world gonna be over. Like, okay, no, nothing gonna be over. Everything continues to be as it is. And Georgian Dream is also playing a populist, because they are saying, like, if we don't win these elections, like there is Russian army, they will invade again, and like National Movement or some other opposition party, they will convince Georgia, and West and US will convince Georgia to open a second front against Russia and try to gain control over Abkhazia and South Ossetia. And nobody wants war here, and you should vote for us. And this is also very populist. I don't think even in the opposition there are some such crazy people who are considering this as an option. Like Georgian Dream were always these conformists who are trying to search for the best position among the world powers, and they are trying not to lean to one side, and they were always doing this. And I guess if they win these elections, when they win these elections, I guess, well, not with the constitutional majority, obviously, but they will continue this politics. And
So
I
it's more of
guess,
a balanced policy, do you believe?
yeah. I guess there will be a balanced policy. I think West will make pressure on them. I guess maybe we will lose visa liberalization. I feel like that. But as it happened in Russia, when there were sanctions opposed against Russia on most parts of trading, and their idea was, let's oppose sanctions against people, and they will become more opposition expansionists, and they will blame their government for that. They didn't. What they did, and when they opposed sanctions against Russia, I know I was in Russia in this period, and I know people they were blaming West because they were saying like we people who are living like just our average lives here, we didn't do anything bad to West, and they are opposing sanctions which are mostly against average people, and like there were some prices going high, and there were some products which you can't buy right now. And people were blaming West because they were opposing sanctions against locals, against just people who were living there, not again. And those sanctions were not playing any role for the government or something like that. And I guess something the same happens here if we lose visa liberalization. The people here will blame West, not the government. They're gonna say like we for whole our history, like last even if we consider Saakashvili period and period of Georgian Dream, most of the time we were saying that we are in favor of European Union decision and we want to become a part of European Union, but European Union didn't do anything in this period for Georgia, only like 1 or 2 years beforehand. And I guess that uh, those sanctions opposed against just the people who maybe want to travel to Milan or Madrid or something like that, they will more be disappointed in Europe and their decisions than in Georgian Dream. And maybe this is the case. And the Georgian Dream will just stand in this comfort zone between these great powers, between US, between Europe, and between Russia, China, and somehow try to navigate between them. I guess
Mhm.
that's what happens after the elections.
Let's talk a little bit more about the wider geopolitics. Well, one of the things that became an issue was last week, I believe, it was Ivanishvili who put out the idea of apologizing to the people of Abkhazia and South Ossetia for the mistakes of the Saakashvili government in 2008, because of which there was a war and so forth. On the other side of the 2008 conflict, Russia has, well, we don't know if this is related to the conflict, but Russia has apparently suspended social aid to Abkhazia. And that was also very interesting to us. So I wanted to ask this question. It might be provocative to some, but is it out of the realm of possibility to think that Georgia and Russia may reconcile their differences around Abkhazia and South Ossetia someday soon in the near future?
Well, I was also having this question, like for the last period, and that's a great question actually.
No, let me tell
I
you something like
Yeah.
something real. Russia says, they're not against South Ossetia and Abkhazia joining a union with Georgia with some high degree of autonomy. If the people vote that way, and then eventually people might vote that way, I'm not sure. But do you think that's something that's possible?
Well, there's a big difference between what politics say and what politics do, right? And they might say this thing, but I don't think they ever consider this to happen. Actually, okay. If we begin with Ivanishvili and his speech, I guess like Georgian Dream is trying to find the most popular topics in society, and obviously like our territorial integrity is a popular topic among society, and they are trying to play out this topic as much as possible, and they want to make so there is an idea in some part of society that maybe Georgian Dream has some agreement with Russian government about these territories or about South Ossetia at least, and maybe there are going to be some process after the elections, And Georgian Dream is somehow fueling these hopes of people. But from my perspective, I don't see any background of that. If you saw, like a couple of days ago, there was an agreement between Russia and South Ossetia for the military aid, and so I guess military are going to rise in a number in South Ossetia from Russia, and this is somehow going controversial with what Ivanishvili said, because here I see there are no evidences that something is going to happen and something is going to change regarding those two regions. I see that Russia has its own politics in those regions, and they are promoting this politics successful. There was a small talk, I guess, between Abkhazia and Russia about this apartments law, and that Abkhazia should convince people that apartments law is good for the developing of the region, and there are going to be more investments from Russia if they pass this law. And I guess Russia is somehow making pressure on them to pass this law, and they are also like making militaries number of militaries higher in South Ossetia. And I guess those steps show us that there are no real evidence behind that there is some kind of agreement between Georgian Dream and Ivanishvili and Russian Federation about these regions. I guess Georgian Dream is living in some bubble where they hope that something will change with these regions, but Russia has its own politics, and with this such kind of promises about like they are sorry or they will be sorry for 2008, I think this is a very populist thing, and this won't change, and I don't think Russia ever allows some kind of elections in South Ossetia or Abkhazia regarding the uniting with Georgia, because why should they? Think from the perspective of Russia. You have a great power over like Georgian politics, when you have a power over those two regions, and you can't trust Georgian politics, as you know, because when Saakashvili came into power, I don't know if you remember, if you're familiar with, but he was very in favor of having a good relationship with Vladimir Putin and Russia.
Yeah.
He opened up borders for Russian tourists, and there was very popular step when he was at the border and he was meeting Russian tourists by himself. And he was very happy to see them. And he had a meeting with Vladimir Putin in the beginning of his presidential campaign. And then what Russia got was a very pro-Western country with some threats that there are going to be some NATO missiles and NATO army at their borders. And I guess, well, why should they trust that something like that doesn't happen again? And like having those two regions under control is something that prevents Georgia from becoming this threat to Russia.
So my sense is that you're attributing some of this talk by Georgian Dream to populism. But on the other hand, the West has also made a big deal that these elections are a pivot to the West or away from the West, in which case it will be the end of democratic Georgia as we know it. Both sides seem to have their preferred laws that they're pushing forward, whether they be apartment laws, as you mentioned, or foreign agent laws. So between the dangling of this potential for attaining territorial integrity and reuniting with Abkhazia and South Ossetia on one side, and the potential of a civilizational catastrophe on the other, is all this just a bunch of election time populism and demagoguery?
Yeah, well, yeah, it is mostly populistic element of these elections. I was in Russia also. I was speaking to some Russian experts, and I haven't seen anything in Russian politics which, if there was a case, there would be people who would say that yes, there is something going on. I guess maybe there is some agreement. I guess maybe they had a talk with each other. No, like Russian politics goes this way. They know what they are doing. They have its own interests in these regions, in Abkhazia and South Ossetia. They are pushing their interests there, and Georgian Dream is living in their somehow reality right now, in pre-election reality, when they need to win some votes. And I guess that some Western colleagues are trying to convince people that, well, nothing will change with these regions in the future. If something changed with these regions in the future, it will change in a worst way to Georgia, not in the best way, as Georgian Dream is trying to convince people. So for me, it's just an obvious thing. It is the same with their promises about UNM, because, well, there is a promise and you don't see any evidences or any proof that this might work out. And even with these regions, what are we going to do? There are people who don't see themselves as a part of Georgia,
Yeah,
and
they're separatists.
even if you make some kind of, I don't know, elections there,
So
I don't
even with
think that.
high autonomy, they would not want to be part of Georgia.
No, no, sure not, sure not. Even with the high autonomy, they don't trust Georgians, and they don't trust their promises about high autonomy. They trust Russia in the case that Russia is going to invest a lot in these regions. Russia is going to like make those regions flourish, I guess. And in this case, those regions have well, I met people from those regions. I know that whole their childhood and period of school and other things, they are fed with the stories that Georgians are the enemies. They were killing people. They killed some of your relatives, and they are bad. And you shouldn't have any contact with them because they are pure evil. And in this case, you can't make these people, you can't convince these people to become part of Georgia in any way, I guess. And I don't see any options where those people will be in favor of becoming a part of Georgia. Nor in the South Ossetia, no, not in Abkhazia. Well, for me now, this is like out of any reality.
Yeah, that is interesting because from an Armenian perspective, obviously we have our own selfish reasons for wanting to see rapprochement between Russia and Georgia. And the main tangible reason that we want to see this is the reopening of the Abkhaz railway. Okay, even let's say without any rapprochement about Abkhazia and South Ossetia, do you see potential for more cooperation between Russia and Georgia in such a way that this railway could reopen? Most Armenian exports to Russia go through the Lars checkpoint, and it's always blocked. And sometimes it's like a single point of failure in engineering terminology.
Yeah, I hear these high hopes from Armenia about this railway road very often, actually. And I guess that this railroad is in favor of Armenian interests. And I guess, yeah, I know that Lars is not the best way of exchanging goods, I guess. And it's not ideal, and you don't have any options there. In this case, I think that well, we need to wait for the elections to end, I guess, and I feel like Georgian Dream will continue the politics where they try not to make enemies with any big players. I guess that if Georgia will become more interesting for Russia, Russia will consider somehow opening up conversation about South Ossetia in some way, because even Geographically, South Ossetia is very is not very convenient for Russia because there is a huge mountain and there is only one hole in Rocky, which is just connecting Russia with South Ossetia, and it's not very convenient to having such territory. Mostly like border with Georgia is like leaning on just fields, and Russia is not getting anything from South Ossetia. There are no benefits from South Ossetia, and South Ossetia, I guess, may become a good point of conversation between Russia and Georgia, maybe in future. And maybe if Georgia becomes somehow interesting for Russia, but in this case, there should also be considered an interest of European Union and interest of US because I don't think that Georgia will risk making a diplomatic relationship again with Russia with the risk of losing any interest from US and European Union. And if there are going to be an agreement between all of those powers, I think there should be a case. But we need to wait until the election end up and protests end up, and they will see.
Okay. You and many analysts are predicting that there could be protests. Actually, you said earlier that you see that there will be protests after the elections. Do you see some of these protests devolving into violence, actually? Do you see that one side or the other is willing to accept the election results?
As I see right now, I don't feel like anybody is going to accept the election results. I think Georgian Dream will not accept results which are not a constitutional majority because I think obviously they see this as next 4 years declining of the popularity. If they don't get a constitutional majority, they won't be able to pass the laws which they want to pass. And in this next 4 years, I think West will do their best to decline their popularity and they try to make those opposition players more popular. Also, opposition is not going to accept this. I guess they will say that there were some errors, main mistakes made in the election process, and the results are fake, and they will get people out. There are going to be a lot of people. I am sure it will happen. And is it going? Well, I think they will try to make those protests violent. There are gonna be some points where, where there are protests in Georgia. Mostly every protest they are trying to make them violent. They are trying to make government to use force against them. And when you are using force against the protest, more Protestants come out, and that's their tactics, I guess. And I don't know, obviously, I don't know if this is the case, and this protest will become violent. But I am sure there are going to be attempts to make those protests violent for sure.
Now let's talk a little bit about Georgian-Armenian relations. When I was initially when we were initially chatting, I tried to think about how Georgians and Armenians see themselves in the region, and I think Georgians still see themselves as part of Europe. Armenians culturally, at least, feel like they're in Europe, in Paris. Meanwhile, both nations are geographically located in the Middle East, I would say, and Aleppo and Damascus are much closer to both countries than Paris is. Paradoxically, I think also both countries feel far from each other. At least, I think that in general the relations are cordial, but not particularly warm. Do you think that that's an accurate representation of the worldview that Armenians and Georgians have of each other and the region?
Yeah, I guess if we speak about Georgian Armenian relations, We can say that, well, we have a very close relationship. I guess Pashinyan was in Georgia like a couple of weeks ago, and they had a meeting here. Like everything is going smooth, but even from my perspective, like how I see it in the region, neither Armenia nor Georgia never had like common interests. And when Georgia was purely pro-Western and they were like, we are going to become a part of NATO, we are going to become a part of European Union, and Armenia, on the other side, were becoming a part of this Eurasian Council or something.
Yeah, economic union. Yeah.
Yeah, and in this case, we know that they are different. They were different into foreign policy interests, and now it is changing. Now, like I guess even Armenia see themselves more pro-Western than Georgia is right now, and we somehow already got disappointed from this kind of path, I guess. And I feel like if in some point of history, you know the story when there was an Russian Empire which collapsed, and there was a small period between Russian Empire and USSR, and
Yeah, the
there were
Transcaucasian Federation.
yeah. And they were like Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Armenia was thinking, oh, we can become a one country. That's great.
Yes.
Yeah, and the problem was they were seeing themselves with the different foreign policy interests because there was the Germany and there was Britain and there was Ottoman
French.
Empire.
Oh,
Yeah, and they were like, okay, no, this won't play out because everybody were seeing their supervisors differently, and this is the case now. I guess in Armenia and Georgia, they are seeing their supervisors differently. If at some point of the history we will get to one point, to one world view, I guess the relations will become warmer and closer. But in this case, we should consider also Azerbaijan because Georgia doesn't want to make too much close ties with Armenia because there are many things which are linked to Azerbaijan, the gas pipes and trading
and railway.
and many other things. And Azerbaijan is using Georgian territory to be connected with Turkey, and they are somehow trying to figure out this with this Zangezur corridor, and they will be less connected
Like
with
dependent on
Georgia.
Georgia?
Yeah. If the Zangezur corridor works out, and of course they don't want to like be fully on the Georgian border to have a connections with Turkey, and they are seeing this to work out. And I guess also Georgia doesn't want to doesn't want to make too close ties with Azerbaijan, and they don't want to lose Armenia as their close friend. And also differently, they don't want to make too many close ties with Armenia to lose Azerbaijan interests. And I guess I guess the relations will stay like the same as they are now, not too far, not too close as it was most part of the history.
Yeah, definitely. We were just speaking with Pascal Lota. He's a professor of law in Japan, and he's spearheading this concept of neutrality studies, where he's trying to sell countries to be more neutral because that gives you more leverage. And it seems like in the case of Georgia, its neutral position vis-a-vis Armenia and Azerbaijan is definitely giving it more leverage. But I have to say that maybe this is an emotional issue. It might sound like an emotional issue, but I think there are some elements of historic truth that are very difficult for Armenians to give up and or accept. Okay, let me just say what it is. So we know that Turkey is also an important neighbor. Besides Azerbaijan, Turkey is also an important neighbor. And one of the foreign policy red lines for Turkey is denial of the genocide that was perpetrated against Armenians in 1915. When we were talking with another Georgian colleague, they mentioned that Georgia has to be very careful in its foreign policy related to issues such as the 1915 genocide due to Turkey. For Armenians, the issue is, of course, I would say a load-bearing truth, meaning that it is a core part of our identity, even though I would say that the current regime in Armenia is trying to chisel that away. But I would say most Armenians accept that as as part of their core identity, and it is accepted by most international scholars as historic truth. Do you believe that it would be possible to have some kind of a truth between understanding of this issue between Armenians and Georgians? Because as far as I know, Georgia has not officially recognized that the Armenian genocide happened, and I'm not sure whether that would bring us closer, but it might be one of the things that would bring us closer.
Well, it could have, I guess, but as you yourself pointed out, Georgia should be careful about their moves, and I guess we don't want to disappoint Turkey. In this case, there is this Kars agreement
Yes.
between Georgia and Turkey about some territories, and Turkey they have a lot of investments in Ajara region, and they have a lot of people there who are working there and who are making businesses there. And Ajara region is very influenced by Turkey, and the people from Ajara region go to Turkey very often for trading, for studying, for just traveling in travel purposes. And I guess
Yeah,
like
I'm sure much more Georgians go to Turkey than they do to Armenia. So from an economical perspective,
yes, and I feel like yeah, maybe such decision would benefit the Georgian-Armenian relations, but this would also harm Georgian relations with some other countries. I guess that this is a more like symbolical thing, and maybe some benefits from again trading, from opening up some corridors with Russia. And I don't know, maybe if Georgia would play a better role in the conflict which Azerbaijan and Armenia had, and maybe they would like become at least a platform where governments could speak. This would benefit more than just recognizing a genocide. I guess this is a more symbolical thing which won't which won't benefit like average Armenian citizens who live in Armenia, but some trading benefits and maybe some safety benefits. They would play a better role in this case.
All right, let's leave it there for today. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Bitsadze.
thank you.
Thank you very much also, and I was very glad to be here with you, and you are great co-hosts and you have a great audience, so my pleasure.
Thank you very much. Hopefully, we can talk to you after the elections and see how things are evolving.
Definitely.
That's our show today. This episode was recorded on September 21, 2024. We've been talking with Dr. Nikoloz Bitsadze, who is a researcher at the Center for International Politics Research and Forecasting, CIPRF, with a PhD in Politics and International Relations from Tbilisi State University. For more information on the people in this show, check out the show notes for this episode at podcast.groong.org/episode number. I'm Asbed Bedrossian.
And this is Hovik Manucharyan.
Please follow us on social media and follow us everywhere you get your Armenian news. The links are in the show notes. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.